So we've talked a lot about the vessels, tactics, and doctrines utilized by the Imperial Navy, but today we're going to talk about one of the most significant classes of military vessel in all of Star Wars history, the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer. Now, that's a very big topic, so today let's just give a general overview of what the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer is and how it was used. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoy this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Many of us are probably very familiar with the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer. After all, it was one of the first ships we ever saw in Star Wars, being the ship chasing Leia's Corellian Corvette at the opening of A New Hope. But there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to these impressive ships, so I figured today we'll just give a general overview of the Imperial class as a whole, how they were utilized, how they were designed, and really the impact they had on the galaxy. So let's start with what the Imperial class is. The Imperial-Class Star Destroyer formed the backbone of the Imperial Navy. They were the massive capital ships that were at the heart of nearly every Imperial battle group, and during the reign of the Empire, 25,000 Imperial-Class Star Destroyers were built and commissioned by the Imperial Navy. These massive vessels primarily functioned as battleships in what would be called battleship diplomacy, but they could fill a lot of other roles as well, like command vessels and even in some cases carriers. They all carried a significant, albeit not that impressive for their size, flight of Imperial TIE fighters, and a wide array of different weaponry to engage other vessels. But the most imposing thing about Imperial-Class Star Destroyers were their size. I mean, these ships were absolutely massive. Now, maybe not in the grand scheme of all ships in Star Wars, but for a mainstay warship, for a galaxy coming off of the Venators and the variety of vessels utilized by the Separatists, the Imperial-Class was gargantuan, significantly larger than the Venators, which were some of the larger ships fielded during the Clone Wars. Add to that the Imperial-Class is very outwardly bristling with turbo lasers, able to really take on anything that it comes up against, and you could see why the Empire would favor this, especially with their shift to the Tarkin Doctrine. So let's talk about its design and manufacturing. The Imperial-Class Star Destroyer was originally designed by Kuat Drive Yards, likely during the final days of the Clone Wars. Now, in Legends, they were deployed during some of the last battles of the war. It's not entirely clear whether that holds true in canon, but it'd be interesting to think it still does. Either way, the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer was coming into being during the early days of the Empire. During the first months of the Empire, they were still actively using a lot of Venator-Class Star Destroyers, but they were quickly replaced by the first generation of Imperial-Class Star Destroyers, the Imperial-I class, which would be the primary class utilized by the Empire for the first 15 years of its existence. These ships were initially used to supplement, but eventually within the first 5 years almost completely replace the Old Republic Venators. And as the Imperial class became more and more common, it became a ever-present imposing symbol of the Galactic Empire. However, as factions began to oppose the Empire and they began to get more and more capable, the cracks in the Imperial class's armor started to show. Various flaws found in the Imperial-I class Star Destroyer ultimately resulted in them having some shortcomings when it came to direct engagements against rebel forces. As such, the Empire needed to adapt. This adaptation came in the form of a more modernized version of the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, the Imperial II. Now, the Imperial II was fairly different from the Imperial I, with an updated weapons complement and some minor visual differences that make them discernible on screen. The Imperial II started showing up about 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, but they wouldn't really become common until right around the time of the Battle of Hoth, at which point many Imperial I's had undergone a conversion to become Imperial II class Star Destroyers, and the Imperial I class was actually kind of a rare sight. The Imperial II class would become the mainstay of the Imperial Navy all the way through to the end of the war, really. They were present in large numbers at nearly every major battle, from Hoth to Endor to Jakku. And even beyond that, with the collapse of the Galactic Empire, many Imperial II class Star Destroyers, and some Imperial I's inevitably, fled into the unknown regions and would become part of the First Order's navy, while other Imperial-Class Star Destroyers would likely end up in the hands of Imperial warlords, continuing their fight against the New Republic. We know that by the time of the First Order, while they weren't taking mainstay roles and carrying out massive offensives, Imperial-Class Star Destroyers were still used on the outskirts of the First Order's territory and for minor patrol missions and some defensive roles. But overall, the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, while it was a flawed ship, perfectly encapsulated the Empire as a concept. This massive brute force military establishment that really focused more on being terrifying than being effective. And when they finally had to face a war, they tried to modify themselves to be more effective and were only partially successful. Now, there's a lot more to the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, whether you're looking at the Imperial I's or the Imperial II's or the countless ships in this class that played their roles in galactic history, and I want to cover all of that in future videos. But for now, like I said, I just wanted to give an overview of what the Imperial-Class was. It ultimately would come about and replace the Venators, which I mentioned earlier, and if you'd like to learn more about the Venator-Class Star Destroyers utilized by the Galactic Republic during the Clone Wars, I'll leave a link up here to a video I have all about the Venators and why they were so perfect for the Republic during the Clone Wars and why it probably would have been a good idea for the Empire to keep them around. And I want you to let me know down in the comments, which of the two types of Imperial-Class Star Destroyers do you prefer more? Do you like the Imperial-I class, the sort of original Star Destroyers we see in A New Hope, or do you like the Imperial-II more, the more modernized versions we see in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.